The accusation rang out across the dusty mercantile like a gunshot, and Rose Bennett felt her entire body go cold despite the sweltering New Mexico heat that baked Stein's Pass in the summer of 1882. She stood frozen near the door of Patterson's general store, her worn calico dress clinging to her back with sweat, her empty basket still clutched in trembling hands as Mr. Patterson himself pointed a thick finger directly at her chest. "Thief! This woman just stuffed bread into her dress," he shouted, his jowls quivering with indignation. The handful of other customers in the store turned to stare, their faces ranging from shocked to disgusted. Rose felt the blood drain from her face as every eye in the room fixed on her. "I did not," she managed to whisper, but her voice came out too soft, too weak. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "I did not steal anything, Mr. Patterson. I have not touched your bread." "Liar!" The shopkeeper stormed toward her, his bulk making the floorboards creak. "I saw you with my own eyes, reaching for the shelf, looking around all suspicious-like, then tucking something into your bodice." Rose's cheeks flamed crimson. She had been reaching for the shelf, yes, but only to steady herself after a wave of dizziness had swept over her. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, and the heat combined with hunger had made her light-headed. But she would never steal. Her parents had raised her better than that, even if they were gone now, and she was alone in this harsh territory trying to make her way as a seamstress. "Mr. Patterson, please, I swear to you I have taken nothing. You may search me if you must, but I am innocent." Her voice shook despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "Oh, I will search you, and when I find that bread, I am calling the sheriff. We do not tolerate thieves in Stein's Pass." He reached out to grab her arm, and Rose instinctively pulled back, which only made her look more guilty in the eyes of the gathering crowd. "Now just hold on there." The voice was deep and calm, with a slight drawl that marked its owner as someone who had spent considerable time in Texas. Rose turned to see a man step forward from where he had been examining saddle blankets near the back of the store. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who made his living on horseback. His dusty brown hat shadowed his face, but she could see strong features, a firm jaw darkened with several days' worth of stubble, and eyes the color of creek water after a storm, clear and steady. "This does not concern you, stranger," Mr. Patterson snapped. "Keep to your own business." The man walked closer with an easy, confident stride, his spurs jingling softly with each step. He wore typical cowboy garb, worn denim pants, a sun-faded blue shirt, a leather vest, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. Everything about him spoke of hard work and long trails, but there was something else too, something in the way he carried himself that suggested he was not a man to be trifled with. "Well now, I am making it my business," he said, his tone still calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "Because I have been standing right here for the past 10 minutes, and I have had a clear view of this young lady the entire time. She has not taken anything." Mr. Patterson sputtered. "You could not possibly have seen her the whole time." "She was over by the bread counter and you were all the way back there." "I have good eyes," the cowboy replied. "Goes with the profession. And I am telling you she did not take your bread. Maybe you saw wrong. Maybe the light played tricks on you, but she is innocent. Now see here." The shopkeeper was turning an alarming shade of purple. "I know what I saw. Are you calling me a liar?" "I am calling you mistaken," the man said. His hand had not moved toward his gun, but everyone in the store was acutely aware of its presence. "Big difference." Rose found her voice again. "Please, I do not want trouble. Mr. Patterson, I will let you search me and then this whole misunderstanding can be cleared up." "There is nothing to search," the cowboy said firmly, "because you did not take anything. He turned his attention back to Patterson. "How much does a loaf of bread cost in your establishment?" The shopkeeper blinked, confused by the change in direction. "What? 10 cents? What does that have to do with anything?" The tall stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin which he flipped through the air. Mr. Patterson caught it reflexively. "There. I just bought a loaf of bread in this lady's name, so even if your eyes did not deceive you, which I am certain they did, the matter is now paid for. She owes you nothing, and you have no cause to hold her here or call the sheriff." "But that is not the point," Patterson protested. "The point is she tried to steal from me." "The point is you accused an innocent woman without proof," the cowboy corrected, his voice hardening. "And you were about to humiliate her in front of everyone here based on what you thought you saw. Now, I have paid for the bread. The matter is settled, unless you want to keep arguing and lose more business while good customers stand around waiting." Several of the other shoppers murmured agreement. One woman, Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, spoke up. "I have known Rose Bennett since she arrived in Stein's Pass 6 months ago, and she has been nothing but honest and hardworking. I find this whole accusation hard to believe." Mr. Patterson looked around at the faces in his store, clearly calculating whether pressing the issue would hurt his reputation more than dropping it. Finally, he pocketed the coin with poor grace. "Fine, but I will be watching you," he said to Rose, pointing at her again. "You set 1 foot wrong in my store again, and I will have the law on you faster than you can blink." Rose felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give him the satisfaction. "I will not be setting foot in your store again at all, Mr. Patterson. You have made it clear I am not welcome here. I will take my business elsewhere." "The nearest elsewhere is 15 miles away," he said with a nasty smile. "Then I will walk 15 miles, she replied, lifting her chin. She turned toward the door, wanting nothing more than to escape the stares and whispers, but the cowboy fell into step beside her. "Allow me to escort you, miss," he said quietly. She glanced up at him, really looking at his face for the first time. He had strong, weathered features that spoke of years under the brutal southwestern sun. His eyes were kind, though, despite the hardness the frontier had carved into him. She judged him to be in his mid-20s, maybe 26 or 27. Young enough to still have some idealism, old enough to know how to handle himself. "Thank you, but you have done enough," she said softly. "I do not wish to impose on you further." "No imposition," he assured her. "I was finished with my business here anyway." They stepped out into the bright sunlight, and Rose had to squint against the glare. The street was busy for late afternoon, with cowboys, miners, and ranchers going about their business. Wagons rattled past, kicking up dust that hung in the still air. Across the way, the saloon was already doing brisk business, and the sound of an out-of-tune piano drifted out whenever someone pushed through the batwing doors. Rose's legs suddenly felt weak, and she swayed. The cowboy's hand shot out to steady her, his grip gentle but firm on her elbow. "Whoa there. You all right, miss?" "Yes, I just the heat," she stammered, but they both knew it was more than that. Her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and she closed her eyes in mortification. The cowboy was silent for a moment, then said, "There is a restaurant just down the street. Wung's Place. He serves good food, reasonable prices. Would you allow me to buy you some lunch?" "I cannot accept," Rose said immediately. "You have already done too much. You spent money on me in there, and I cannot repay you." "I am not asking you to repay me," he said. "I am asking you to share a meal with me because I am hungry and would appreciate the company. Nothing more complicated than that." Rose hesitated. She was desperately hungry, having spent her last few coins on thread for her sewing 2 days ago. She had been planning to finish a dress order today and collect payment, which would have given her enough for food. But pride warred with practicality, and pride was losing. "I do not even know your name," she said finally. He smiled then, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less severe. "Carter Powell, miss. Most folks call me Carter, and you are Rose Bennett." She managed a small smile in return. "Most folks call me Rose." "Well then, Rose Bennett, will you do me the honor of joining me for lunch?" He offered his arm in a formal gesture that seemed almost comical given their dusty, frontier surroundings. After a moment, she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. "Yes, Mr. Powell, thank you." "Carter," he corrected gently. "Carter," she repeated, and they began walking down the wooden sidewalk toward Wang's restaurant. The restaurant was a simple establishment, but clean and welcoming. Mr. Wang, a Chinese immigrant who had originally come to work on the railroads before settling in Stein's Pass, greeted them with a warm smile and showed them to a table near the window. The smells coming from the kitchen made Rose's mouth water and her stomach clench with anticipation. Carter ordered beef stew, bread, and coffee for both of them without asking her preference, which might have annoyed her under other circumstances, but she was too grateful to care. When the food arrived, steaming and fragrant, she had to force herself not to fall on it like a starving animal. She tried to eat slowly with dignity, but Carter seemed to understand. He focused on his own meal and kept up a gentle stream of conversation that did not require much response from her. "I have been working on the Bar T Ranch, about 20 miles north of here," he told her. "Been there 3 months now. Good outfit, fair boss. The work is hard but honest." "How long have you been in New Mexico?" Rose asked between bites of the best stew she had ever tasted. "Just since spring. Before that I was in Texas, worked ranches there since I was 16. He paused. "I am 27 now, so that is 11 years of eating trail dust and sleeping under stars." "That sounds lonely," she ventured. He shrugged. "It can be, but it has its rewards. I have seen country most people never will, watched the sun rise over the Guadalupe Mountains. Camped by the Pecos River under more stars than you could count in a lifetime. There is a freedom to it. But you must want to settle down eventually," Rose said. "Everyone does, do they not?" Carter was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "Maybe. I have never thought much about it, never had much reason to. But lately I have been thinking it might be nice to have a place of my own. Some land, a few cattle, a house that does not leak when it rains." He glanced up at her. "What about you? How did you end up in Stein's Pass?" Rose's expression clouded. "My parents and I were traveling west. We left Missouri 2 years ago, heading for California, but we only made it this far before cholera took them both." "I am sorry," Carter said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her eyes sting with unshed tears. "Thank you. It was hard. It is still hard, but I could not just give up. They wanted a better life for me, so I stayed here and learned to make a living with my sewing. I am actually quite good at it." She said this last part with a touch of pride. "I believe it," Carter said. "That dress you are wearing, did you make it?" She looked down at her faded calico. "Yes, but this is old. I made it over a year ago. I have much nicer things in my room, things I have made recently, but I save those for church and special occasions." "I would like to see your work sometime," he said. "I need a new shirt. This one is about worn through at the elbows." Rose studied his shirt and saw that he was right. "I could make you one," she offered, "to repay you for the meal and for what you did in the store." "I told you no repayment necessary." "I know, but I would like to, please. It would make me feel better." He considered, then nodded. "All right. If it would make you feel better, I would be much obliged, but I insist on paying you for the work." "We will discuss that later," Rose said, knowing she would not actually charge him anything like her regular rate. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and Carter ordered pie for them both, despite Rose's protests that she was full. The pie was apple, with cinnamon and a flaky crust, and Rose decided she could probably make room after all. As they ate, Rose found herself studying Carter when she thought he was not looking. He had strong hands, calloused from years of ranch work, but his movements were surprisingly graceful. He had good manners too, better than many cowboys she had encountered. He used his napkin, did not talk with his mouth full, and treated Mr. Wung with courtesy and respect. These small things mattered to Rose, who had been raised by parents who believed that character showed in how you treated everyone, not just those who could do something for you. "Can I ask you something?" she said as she set down her fork, her pie finished. "Sure. Why did you help me back there? You did not know me. You could have just kept quiet and stayed out of it." Carter was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on something outside the window. "My mother," he said finally. "When I was 10 years old, she was accused of something she did not do, accused of being too friendly with a ranch hand on the spread where my father worked. It was not true. The ranch hand had been making unwanted advances, and she had rejected him, so he spread lies about her to get revenge. But the damage was done. My father lost his job. We had to move on. My mother never really recovered from the shame of it, even though anyone who knew her should have known she was innocent. She died 2 years later." He looked back at Rose. "So when I see someone being falsely accused, especially a woman who cannot defend herself the same way a man could, I cannot just stand by. I know what it does to people." Rose felt her heart clench. "I am so sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago," he said, but she could see the old pain still there in his eyes. "Anyway, I saw you in that store and I saw you were innocent. Patterson was wrong whether he knows it or not. But you gave him money anyway," Rose pointed out, "even though I did nothing wrong. 10 cents to end the situation and get you out of there seemed like money well spent," Carter said. "Pride is fine and good, but sometimes the smart thing is to pay the toll and move on." "That is very pragmatic of you," he grinned. "I have my moments." They left the restaurant with Rose feeling better than she had in days. The food had restored her physical strength, and Carter's kindness had done something to restore her faith in human decency after the ugliness at Patterson's store. "Where do you stay?" Carter asked as they stood on the sidewalk, uncertain of how to part ways. "Mrs. Henderson's boarding house," Rose replied. "Just up the street. I rent a small room there." "The same Mrs. Henderson who spoke up for you in the store?" "Yes, she has been very kind to me," Carter nodded. "That is good. Everyone needs someone in their corner." He shifted his weight, suddenly seeming less confident. "Rose, I know we just met, but I would like to call on you again if that would be all right. Maybe Sunday after church. I could rent a buggy and we could take a drive. It gets cooler in the evening and there are some pretty spots around here." Rose's heart fluttered in her chest. "I would like that," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I would like that very much." His face lit up with a smile that made her stomach do a small flip. "Sunday then, I will come by around 4. 4 would be perfect." They stood there for another moment, neither quite wanting to leave until finally Carter tipped his hat. "Until Sunday then, Rose Bennett." "Until Sunday, Carter Powell." She watched him walk away, his tall form moving with that easy cowboy grace, and felt something warm and hopeful bloom in her chest. Then she turned and made her way to the boarding house, her mind already spinning with thoughts of what she might wear on Sunday. Mrs. Henderson was in the kitchen when Rose entered, rolling out dough for biscuits. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Rose, I heard about what happened at Patterson's. Are you all right, dear? Word traveled fast in a small town. Rose should have expected it. I am fine, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you for speaking up for me. That Patterson is a fool, the older woman said firmly. Always has been. Too quick to judge and too slow to admit when he is wrong. But I heard that Cowboy fellow stood up for you and paid for the bread. Yes, madam. Carter Powell, he was very kind. Mrs. Henderson's eyes sharpened with interest. Carter Powell, is it? And then he took you to lunch at Wung's restaurant. Rose felt her cheeks warm. News really does travel fast. This is Stein's Pass, dear. If someone sneezes on one end of town, someone on the other end says bless you. She pointed her rolling pin at Rose. But that Cowboy sounds like a good man. Not many would have done what he did. He is coming to call on Sunday, Rose admitted. We are going for a buggy ride. Mrs. Henderson's stern expression softened into a smile. Good. It is about time you had a young man paying you attention. You are too pretty and too young to spend all your time alone in your room sewing. I like sewing, Rose protested, but she was smiling too. I know you do, and you are talented at it, but there is more to life than work. Now, go upstairs and rest. You still look peaked. Rose did as she was told, climbing the narrow stairs to her small room under the eaves. It was not much, just a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and her precious sewing machine that she had bought third-hand but kept in perfect working order. But it was hers, and it was clean, and the window looked out over the street below. She sat on the bed and let out a long breath, the events of the day catching up with her. She had been so frightened in Patterson's store, so humiliated. But then Carter had stepped in and everything had changed. She touched her fingertips to her lips, thinking about the way he had looked at her over lunch, the kindness in his creek water eyes. She barely knew him, she reminded herself. One meal did not mean anything. But even as she thought it, she knew it was not quite true. Something had passed between them in that restaurant, some connection that felt deeper than their brief acquaintance warranted. Or maybe she was just being foolish, letting her lonely heart run away with her good sense. Only time would tell. The next few days passed slowly for Rose. She threw herself into her work, finishing the dress she owed to Mrs. Crawford, the banker's wife, and starting on a new skirt for the minister's daughter. Her fingers flew over the fabric, stitching seams and hemlines with the practiced ease of long experience. Sewing calmed her, the repetitive motions soothing her thoughts. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on her work, her mind kept drifting back to Carter. She wondered what he was doing out at the Bar T Ranch, whether he was thinking about her at all, whether Sunday would ever arrive. She felt like a silly schoolgirl, and it both embarrassed and delighted her. On Saturday morning, there was a knock on her door. Mrs. Henderson stood there holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "This just came for you. The boy from the livery brought it." Curious, Rose took the package and untied the string. Inside was a length of beautiful dark blue cotton fabric, far finer than anything she could afford, and a note written in a firm, masculine hand. "Thought you might be able to use this. Carter." Rose stared at the fabric, her fingers tracing the weave. It was expensive, probably cost him a full day's wages or more. She should not accept it, it was too much, but oh, it was beautiful. And there was something touching about the gesture, about him thinking of her and trying to help her in a way that would not wound her pride. "Well," Mrs. Henderson demanded from the doorway. "What is it?" "Fabric," Rose said softly. "From Carter." The older woman came closer to examine it. "That is quality goods. He has good taste. And good sense, sending you something you can use for your work rather than some frivolous trinket." Rose nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She had not expected this, had not expected him to think of her at all between their lunch and their planned outing. But here was proof that she had been on his mind, just as he had been on hers. "I need to thank him," she said. "You can thank him tomorrow," Mrs. Henderson said practically. "Now, let's talk about what you are going to wear on this buggy ride." Sunday dawned clear and hot, as most days did in Stein's past during summer. Rose attended the morning service at the small church, sitting in her usual pew and trying to focus on Reverend Matthew's sermon about patience and faith. It seemed particularly apt, given her current state of nervous anticipation. After church, she spent the afternoon getting ready. She bathed in the tin tub in the bathing room, washing her long brown hair and pinning it up carefully. She chose her best dress, a green cotton she had made herself with tiny buttons down the front and lace at the collar. It was not fancy by city standards, but it was pretty and it fit her well. Mrs. Henderson helped her with her hair, arranging it in a soft style with a few curls framing her face. "You look lovely," the older woman declared. "That cowboy will not know what hit him." Rose felt her stomach flutter with nerves. What if I have nothing to talk about? What if he regrets asking me? Nonsense. You are a smart, interesting young woman. Just be yourself. At 10 minutes to 4, Rose was waiting in the parlor, trying not to pace. At precisely 4 o'clock, she heard the sound of a buggy pulling up outside. She stood, smoothing her skirts with nervous hands. Carter came to the door dressed in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing, his jaw freshly shaved. He held his hat in his hands and looked almost as nervous as she felt. When he saw her, his eyes widened slightly. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," Rose replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "You look very nice as well." Mrs. Henderson appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good afternoon, Mr. Powell. You have Rose back by dark, you hear?" "Yes, madam," Carter said respectfully. "You have my word." He offered Rose his arm, and they walked out to where a smart little buggy waited, pulled by a calm brown horse. Carter helped her up onto the seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. They set off down the main street at a gentle pace, the horses' hooves clopping against the hard-packed dirt. Once they were clear of town, Rose turned to him. "Thank you for the fabric. It was very thoughtful, but it was too much. You should not have spent so much money." "I wanted to," Carter said, "and I figured you could use it for your work, so it was not just a gift, it was an investment in your business." Rose had to smile at that logic. "You are a very unusual man, Carter Powell. I will take that as a compliment." They drove out toward the hills east of town, where the landscape became more varied, with rocky outcroppings and scattered juniper trees providing some relief from the endless flat plains. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, and a light breeze had picked up, making the heat more bearable. Carter pointed out landmarks as they rode, telling her stories about the area. He had a good storytelling voice, deep and expressive, and Rose found herself relaxing as she listened. He told her about the Apache who had once controlled this territory, about the Spanish conquistadors who had passed through centuries before, about the miners and cowboys and dreamers who had come seeking fortune or freedom or simply a place to exist. "You know a lot about this area," Rose observed. "For someone who has only been here a few months." "I like to know about places," Carter said. "History, geography, all of it. My mother taught me to read when I was young, and I have always been curious about the world. I buy books when I can afford them, trade for them when I cannot." "Read them by firelight on the trail." "What kind of books?" Rose asked, genuinely interested. "All kinds. History, adventure stories, even poetry sometimes, though I will deny it if you tell anyone." He shot her a playful look. She laughed. "Your secret is safe with me. I like poetry too. I have a book of Dickinson's poems that was my mother's. I read from it almost every night." They talked about books, about the places they had been, and the places they hoped to see someday. Rose found herself opening up to him in a way she rarely did with anyone, telling him about her dreams of eventually having her own dress shop, about her parents and how much she missed them, about the loneliness of being alone in the world. Carter listened with his full attention, asking questions, sharing his own experiences. He told her about growing up the only child of a ranch hand, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the hard lessons the frontier had taught him. "It can be brutal out here," he said quietly. "I have seen good people broken by bad luck, seen families destroyed by drought or disease or violence, but I have also seen people come together to help each other, seen strangers become family. There is good and bad everywhere, but out here it is all more intense somehow, more real." "I know what you mean," Rose said. "After my parents died, I was so lost, but people here helped me. Mrs. Henderson gave me a room when I had no money. Mrs. Crawford hired me to make dresses for her daughters. The Reverend's wife taught me how to manage my finances so I would not starve. Without them, I do not know what would have happened to me." Carter reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they wrapped around hers. "I am glad they helped you, and I am glad you are here." Rose looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. "I am glad, too." They drove for another hour, eventually stopping at a spot where a small spring fed a pool of clear water. Cottonwood trees grew around it, their leaves rustling in the breeze, providing blessed shade. Carter helped Rose down from the buggy and spread a blanket on the ground near the water. "I brought some things," he said, pulling a basket from under the seat. Inside were apples, cheese, bread, and a jar of cool tea. "Thought you might be hungry." "You are very thoughtful," Rose said, settling onto the blanket and accepting an apple. "Do you do this often? Bring young ladies out for buggy rides?" "Never," Carter admitted. "You are actually the first woman I have ever done this with. I guess I have never met anyone I wanted to spend time with like this before." The honesty in his voice made Rose's heart skip. "I have never done anything like this either," she confessed. "There was a boy back in Missouri before we left. We walked out a few times, but it was nothing serious, and then we moved away." "Do you miss it, Missouri?" Rose considered the question. "I miss how things were before. When my parents were alive and I did not have to worry about where my next meal would come from. But Missouri itself, not really. My father always said we were meant for bigger things, wider horizons. I think he was right." They ate and talked as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Rose learned that Carter's favorite food was his mother's apple pie, that he had once broken his arm falling off a horse when he was 12, that he could play the harmonica but could not carry a tune to save his life. She told him about learning to sew from her grandmother, about the time she accidentally dyed a whole load of white laundry pink, about her secret wish to someday see the ocean. "I have seen it," Carter said. "The Gulf, anyway, down in Texas. It is something else. Water as far as you can see, waves rolling in like they have been doing it since the beginning of time." "I want to see that someday," Rose said wistfully. "Maybe I will take you," Carter said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean if we, that is." Rose took pity on him. "I would like that," she said softly. "Someday." The ride back to town was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. Rose found herself leaning slightly against Carter's shoulder, and he did not pull away. The evening air was cooling, bringing relief from the day's heat, and the first stars were beginning to appear overhead. When they reached Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, Carter helped Rose down from the buggy. They stood there for a moment, neither wanting the evening to end. "I had a wonderful time," Rose said. Thank you for asking me. Thank you for saying yes, Carter replied. Rose, I know this is fast and maybe I should wait, but I would really like to see you again, as often as you will allow. I would like that too, Rose said, her heart soaring. Very much. I get 1 day off a week, usually Sunday, and sometimes I can get away for an evening. Could I write to you? Come visit when I can. Yes, Rose said. Please do. Carter smiled, that wonderful warm smile that transformed his whole face. Then slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned down and kissed her cheek. It was gentle and brief, but it sent warmth flooding through Rose's entire body. Good night, Rose Bennett. Good night, Carter Powell. She watched him climb back into the buggy and drive away, then floated up the steps and into the house. Mrs. Henderson took one look at her face and laughed. I take it the buggy ride went well. It was perfect, Rose breathed. Over the next few weeks, Carter made good on his promise. He came to visit whenever he could get away from the ranch, sometimes just for an hour or two in the evening. They would walk around town, or sit on the porch of the boarding house talking until Mrs. Henderson chased them inside for propriety's sake. On Sundays, they spent the whole afternoon together, taking drives or having picnics or simply sitting by the spring reading to each other from Rose's book of poetry. Rose found herself falling deeper with each passing day. Carter was everything she had not known she was looking for. Strong but gentle, hard-working but not humorless, confident but not arrogant. He made her laugh with his stories and impressed her with his quiet competence. He treated her like she was precious, opening doors for her, helping her over rough ground, listening when she talked about her work and her dreams. And the way he looked at her, like she was the most beautiful, most fascinating thing he had ever seen, made her feel things she had never felt before. For his part, Carter seemed equally smitten. He told her she was beautiful so often that she almost started to believe it. He brought her little gifts, wildflowers, interesting rocks from the ranch, a book of folk tales he thought she might enjoy. Once, he brought her a piece of turquoise he had bought from a traveling Navajo trader, polished smooth and shot through with veins of black matrix. It reminded me of your eyes, he said as he pressed it into her palm. When the light hits them just right, they have these little flecks of gold and green in the brown. Rose had never thought of her eyes as anything special, but the fact that he had noticed such details made her chest feel tight with emotion. 6 weeks after their first buggy ride, Carter arrived at the boarding house on a Sunday evening with a serious expression. Rose felt a flutter of worry when she saw his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked as they settled on the porch swing. "No, nothing wrong," he assured her. "But I need to talk to you about something important." Rose's heart began to pound. "All right." Carter took her hands in his thumbs rubbing gentle circles over her knuckles. "Rose, I know we have not known each other very long, only about 2 months. But I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. When I am at the ranch, all I think about is getting back to see you. When I am with you, I never want to leave. You are smart and kind and strong, and you make me want to be a better man." Tears prickled at Rose's eyes. "Carter." "Let me finish," he said gently. "I have been saving my money for years now. I have almost enough to buy some land and start my own small ranch. Nothing big, just enough for a house and some cattle. I had always thought I would do it alone, but now I cannot imagine building a life that does not have you in it." He took a deep breath. "Rose Bennett, I am not asking you to marry me right this second. I know that would be too fast and I want to do this right. But I am asking if you would consider it, if you would allow me to court you with the intention of marriage when you are ready." Rose felt tears spill down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Carter, I would consider it. I want that. I want a future with you." The relief and joy on his face was beautiful to see. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and she rested her head against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and fast against her ear. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "You already do," she whispered. They sat there on the porch swing as the sun set, holding each other and talking about the future. Carter told her about the piece of land he had his eye on, about 15 miles north of town, near a reliable creek. He described the house he wanted to build, modest but sturdy, with a room where Rose could set up her sewing business. They talked about cattle and horses, about gardens and children, about all the dreams they had only just begun to share. "There is one thing, though," Carter said eventually. "The land I want, it is going up for auction in 3 weeks. The owner died without heirs and the bank is selling it off. I have most of the money saved, but I am about $50 short. I have been working extra hours, doing odd jobs, but I do not know if I can make up the difference in time." "How much do you have saved?" Rose asked. $250, Carter said. "The land will probably go for around 300, maybe a bit more if there are multiple bidders." Rose was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I have some money saved," she said slowly. "About $40. It is not much, but you could have it." "Absolutely not," Carter said firmly. "Rose, that is your security. I cannot take that from you." "You are not taking it," she argued. "I am offering it. If we are going to build a life together, then my money is our money, is it not? And besides, I believe in you. I know you will make the ranch work." Carter looked torn. "I do not feel right about it." "Then consider it a loan," Rose suggested. "You can pay me back when the ranch starts making money, with interest if it makes you feel better." He laughed despite himself. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Bennett. I learned from watching Mrs. Henderson negotiate with traveling salesmen," Rose said with a smile. "So do we have a deal?" Carter pulled her close again. "We have a deal, but I am paying you back every cent with interest." "We will see," Rose said, knowing she would never actually demand repayment but willing to let him have his pride. The next few weeks were a blur of activity and anticipation. Carter worked every hour he could get, and Rose took on extra sewing projects, determined to contribute as much as possible to their shared future. She made shirts for cowboys at the Bar T Ranch, mended clothes for the miners, and even created a fancy dress for Mrs. Patterson, the shopkeeper's wife. Though it galled her to take money from that family, Mrs. Henderson watched the romance bloom with approval. "That Carter is a good man," she told Rose one evening as they sat shelling peas in the kitchen. "You could do far worse." "I know," Rose said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is real, that someone like him wants someone like me." "Oh, hush," Mrs. Henderson said briskly. "You are a catch, and do not let anyone tell you different. Smart, hardworking, pretty, kind, you are exactly the type of woman a smart man would want." The day of the land auction arrived hot and bright. Carter came to town early, looking nervous in his best clothes. Rose met him outside the bank where the auction would be held and squeezed his hand. "You are going to get it," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I hope so," he replied. "Everything depends on this." Inside the bank, a small crowd had gathered. Rose recognized several local ranchers, a few speculators from out of town, and Mr. Higgins, the bank manager, who would be conducting the auction. Carter signed in and took his place, and Rose found a spot along the wall where she could watch. The auction started promptly at 10. Mr. Higgins described the property. 160 acres with water rights to Willow Creek, good grazing land, some timber. The bidding opened at $200. Carter waded through the first few bids, letting others establish the baseline. Two ranchers went back and forth, driving the price up to $275. Then one of them dropped out and Carter made his first bid. $280, he said clearly. The remaining rancher, a man named Thompson who owned a large spread to the north, countered. $290. $300, Carter said. Thompson studied him for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if Carter was serious or bluffing. $310. Rose's heart sank. That was more than they had, but Carter did not hesitate. $320. $325, Thompson shot back. Carter paused and Rose saw him do some mental calculation. $330, he said finally. Thompson frowned. $340. There was a long silence. Rose knew that $340 was probably the absolute limit of what Carter could afford, even with her $40. Going higher would mean he would have nothing left for building materials or supplies. $340, Thompson said again, his voice confident. Going once, going twice, $350, Carter said. Rose's eyes widened. He did not have $350. What was he doing? But as she watched his face, she saw calm determination. He was betting that Thompson would not go higher, that the rancher had his own limit. Thompson scowled. $360. Carter did not even blink. $375. The room went quiet. That was a significant sum for this particular piece of land. Thompson looked angry now, clearly not liking being challenged. $400, he said flatly. Rose felt sick. There was no way Carter could match that. But to her surprise, Carter just smiled slightly and stepped back. All yours, he said. Thompson looked surprised, then satisfied. Mr. Higgins raised his gavel. Sold to Mr. Thompson for $400. Carter walked out of the bank with his head high and Rose hurried after him. On the street, she caught his arm. Carter, I am so sorry. I know how much that land meant to you. But he did not look devastated. Instead, he looked almost pleased. It is all right, he said. That land was not worth $400. Thompson just paid $50 more than it is worth because he wanted to win. That is his problem, not mine. But where does that leave you? Rose asked. Us. There is other land, Carter said. We will find something. And now I know Thompson is willing to overpay out of pride, which is useful information. He took her hands. Rose, I appreciate what you wanted to do, offering me your money. But I have been thinking, and I do not want to start our life together by taking your security away. You earned that money with hard work, and you should keep it. But I want to help, Rose protested. You do help, he assured her. Just by being here, by believing in me, you help more than you know. We will figure this out together, but we will do it right. Rose felt her eyes sting with tears of frustration and affection. You are a stubborn man, Carter Powell. I know, he said with a grin, but you like me anyway. I do, she admitted. Far too much for my own good. Over the next week, Carter made inquiries about other available land in the area. There were a few possibilities, but nothing as ideal as the Willow Creek property had been. Rose could see his disappointment, though he tried to hide it. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, Carter came riding into town at a gallop, something he never did unless it was important. He found Rose at the boarding house, finishing up a dress for the minister's wife, and burst into the parlor with barely contained excitement. Rose. You will not believe what just happened. Mrs. Henderson appeared from the kitchen, wooden spoon in hand. Carter Powell, you do not gallop horses in town. You could have run someone over. Sorry, Mrs. Henderson, he said, not looking sorry at all. But I have news. The Bar T wants to sell me some land. Rose set down her sewing. What? How? Carter explained in a rush. The owner of the Bar T, Mr. Thomas, had heard about Carter losing the bid on the Willow Creek property. He also knew Carter was a good worker and an honest man. So he had made an offer. He would sell Carter 80 acres on the eastern edge of his ranch, land that he was not using much anyway. The price would be $200, well within what Carter could afford. It was not as much land as the other property, but it had good water access and was closer to town. "And that is not all," Carter continued. "Mr. Thomas said I could stay on working at the bar part-time, just 3 days a week instead of 6, so I would still have income while I am getting my own place established. Rose, this is perfect. This is better than I hoped for." Rose felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. She jumped up and threw her arms around him, propriety forgotten. "That is wonderful. Oh, Carter, I am so happy for you." He held her tight, lifting her right off her feet. "For us," he corrected. "Happy for us." Mrs. Henderson cleared her throat. "I suppose this means I should start planning a wedding." Carter set Rose down but kept his arms around her. He looked down at her with such love and hope in his eyes that Rose felt her breath catch. "What do you say, Rose? I know we have only known each other 3 months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Will you marry me? Will you help me build a life on that land?" Rose reached up to cup his face in her hands. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Carter Powell." He kissed her then, right there in Mrs. Henderson's parlor, a deep, sweet kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Mrs. Henderson was wiping her eyes with her apron. "About time," the older woman said gruffly. "I was starting to think you two would dance around each other forever. Now, when are we having this wedding?" "As soon as possible," Carter said. "I want to start building the house before winter, and I want Rose there with me as my wife, not just my sweetheart." "1 month," Rose said. "We need time to prepare, and I need to make a dress. Is that too soon?" "It is not soon enough," Carter said with a grin, "but I will wait if I must." They were married 4 weeks later on a beautiful September morning when the brutal summer heat had finally broken. The wedding took place in the small church, with most of the town in attendance. Rose wore a dress she had made herself from the blue fabric Carter had given her all those weeks ago, trimmed with white lace she had carefully saved her money to buy. She carried wildflowers that Carter had picked that morning, and she had never felt more beautiful than when she saw the look on his face as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Reverend Matthews spoke about love and commitment, about partnership and faith. When it came time for the vows, Carter's voice was strong and clear. "I, Carter Powell, take you, Rose Bennett, to be my wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Rose repeated her own vows, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. "I, Rose Bennett, take you, Carter Powell, to be my wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Carter kissed her with such tenderness that Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks. The small congregation erupted in applause, and Mrs. Henderson was not the only one dabbing at her eyes. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food contributed by half the women in town. There was music and dancing, with one of the cowboys from the bar playing fiddle and another playing guitar. Carter danced with Rose until her feet ached, and she did not care one bit. As the sun began to set, they said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon Carter had borrowed to transport Rose's belongings to their new land. It was not far, only about an hour's drive, but it felt like they were traveling to a whole new world. The land was beautiful in the golden evening light. The creek ran clear and cold over smooth rocks, and cottonwood trees grew along its banks. The grass was tall and green from the late summer rains, perfect for cattle. Carter had already started work on the house, getting the foundation laid and the frame partially up. It would not be finished for another month at least, but he had built a small, sturdy cabin that would serve them in the meantime. He carried Rose over the threshold of the little cabin, both of them laughing, and set her gently on her feet inside. It was just one room with a stove, a bed, a table and chairs, but Rose thought it was the most wonderful place she had ever seen. "Welcome home, Mrs. Powell," Carter said softly. "Welcome home, Mr. Powell," Rose replied, reaching up to kiss him. That night they lay together in their marriage bed, the window open to let in the cool evening air. Rose rested her head on Carter's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. "Are you happy?" Carter asked, his hand stroking her hair. "I have never been happier," Rose said honestly. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that I found you, that we have this life together." "Believe it," he said, kissing the top of her head, "because I am never letting you go." The next few months were hard work, but good work. Carter split his time between building their house and working at the bar tea, while Rose set up her sewing business in a corner of the cabin and took in work from women in town and on surrounding ranches. They worked together whenever they could, with Rose helping to mix mortar or hold boards while Carter hammered and sawed and swore when things did not go quite right. By the time the first snow fell in December, the house was finished. It was not large, just 3 rooms. A main living area with the kitchen, a bedroom, and a small room that Rose used for her sewing. But it was well built and tight against the weather, with a good stone fireplace and real glass in the windows. On the day they moved in, Carter carried Rose over this threshold too, and they stood together in the main room, looking around at what they had built together. "We need furniture," Rose observed, "and curtains, and about 1,000 other things. We will get them," Carter promised. "One thing at a time. We have our whole lives to make this place a home." That winter was cold but cozy. They spent the long evenings together, Rose sewing by lamplight while Carter read aloud from his books or carved small wooden figures as a hobby. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's habits and quirks, building the deep intimacy that would sustain them through the years ahead. In the spring, Carter bought their first cattle, just 10 head to start, and began building up the herd. Rose's sewing business grew as word spread about her skill and fair prices. Money was tight, but they were making it work. And then, in early summer, Rose realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Carter. One evening after dinner, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "There is someone else living in our house now," she said softly. It took him a moment to understand, and then his eyes went wide. "Rose, do you mean we are going to have a baby?" she confirmed. "Sometime in January, I think." Carter let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "A baby! We are going to have a baby. Rose, we are going to be parents." "We are," she agreed, her eyes shining with happy tears. "Are you ready for that?" "I am ready for anything as long as I have you," he said, cradling her face in his hands and kissing her deeply. The pregnancy was not easy. Rose was sick almost every morning for the first few months, and the heat of the summer made her uncomfortable and tired. But Carter was endlessly patient and solicitous, bringing her cool water and fanning her when she was hot, rubbing her aching back and feet, taking over more of the household chores so she could rest. Mrs. Henderson came to visit regularly, bringing supplies and advice. She had helped deliver many babies over the years and promised she would be there when Rose's time came. As Rose's belly grew round with their child, Carter would sometimes rest his hand there in the evenings, marveling at the flutters and kicks he could feel. "Strong baby," he would say with pride. "Takes after the mother, or the father," Rose would counter. "You are the strong one in this family. We are both strong," Carter would say. "And our child will be stronger still." The baby came on a cold January night during a snowstorm. Carter rode through the blizzard to fetch Mrs. Henderson and the doctor, his heart in his throat, terrified that something would go wrong. But Rose was strong, just as he had known she would be, and when he was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found his wife propped up against pillows, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundled infant. "It is a boy," Mrs. Henderson announced with satisfaction. "Healthy lungs, good size. You have a fine son, Carter." Carter approached the bed like he was in a dream. Rose pulled back the blanket to show him the baby's tiny red face, eyes squeezed shut, small fists waving. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked. "I am afraid I will drop him," Carter admitted. "You will not drop him," Rose said with a tired laugh. "Come here." She helped him take the baby, showing him how to support the head. Carter held his son for the first time and felt his entire world shift and reorganize around this tiny person. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Rose, he is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Rose asked. They had talked about names during the pregnancy but never quite settled on one. Carter looked down at his son, this new life that he and Rose had created together, and thought about his own father who had died when Carter was 18. "What about William?" he suggested. "After my father. William Powell." "William," Rose repeated, testing the name. "William Carter Powell." "I like it. Billy for short." Carter carefully handed the baby back to Rose and sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around his wife, looking down at their son. "I cannot believe we made him, that he is ours." "Believe it," Rose said, echoing his words from their wedding night. "Because we are never letting him go." The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch grew slowly but steadily, the herd increasing year by year. Rose's sewing business continued to thrive, providing steady income that helped them through lean times. Billy grew from a baby into a toddler, then a young boy, sturdy and curious and full of energy like his father. When Billy was 3, Rose became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Clara, after Rose's mother. Clara had her mother's brown hair and her father's creek water eyes, and she had both of them wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Carter proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving with both children. He taught Billy to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, and he was endlessly gentle with little Clara, singing to her when she fussed and carrying her around on his shoulders. Rose would watch him with their children and feel her heart swell with love and gratitude for the life they had built together. The incident at Patterson's General Store became a family story, told and retold over the years. "Your father saved me," Rose would tell the children. "He stood up for me when everyone else thought the worst. He saw who I really was, and he chose to believe in me. I knew from the first moment I saw you that you were someone special," Carter would add. "Best decision I ever made, stepping forward that day." The children would roll their eyes at their parents' obvious affection for each other, but secretly they loved hearing the story. It became a touchstone for the family, a reminder of where they had come from and what they had built together. When Billy was 8 and Clara was 5, Carter decided it was time to expand the ranch. The herd had grown to over 100 head, and they needed more grazing land. He approached Mr. Thomas at the Bar T about buying another 40 acres adjacent to their current property. To his surprise, Mr. Thomas made him an even better offer. The older man was getting ready to retire and wanted to scale back his operation. He offered to sell Carter 160 acres at a very reasonable price, essentially giving him a large section of what had once been Bar T land. "You have been a good neighbor and a good worker," Mr. Thomas told him. "I know you will take care of the land, and besides, I like the idea of you and Rose having room to grow. You have built something real here, something lasting." Carter accepted the offer, and suddenly their small ranch was becoming a real operation. It meant more work, more investment, more risk. But it also meant security for their children's future, a legacy they could pass down. Rose was both excited and nervous about the expansion. "Are you sure we can handle this?" she asked Carter one night as they lay in bed discussing the details. "I am sure we can handle anything as long as we do it together," he said, pulling her close. "Look at everything we have already accomplished. We started with nothing but hope and determination, and look at us now. We have land, cattle, a home, beautiful children. We can do this, Rose. I know we can." She turned in his arms to face him. "You know what I love most about you? My devastating good looks," he suggested with a grin. She swatted his shoulder playfully. "Your faith, your certainty that things will work out. You have never let fear stop you from reaching for what you want. You make me brave too." "You were always brave," Carter said seriously. "You survived losing your parents and being alone in a hard place. You built a business from nothing. You married a cowboy with more dreams than money. You are the bravest person I know, Rose Powell." They kissed then, a long, slow kiss that still, after all these years of marriage, made Rose's toes curl and her heart race. Some things never changed, and the love between them was one of those things. If anything, it had only deepened over the years, growing richer and more complex as they weathered life's challenges together. The expanded ranch meant hiring help. Carter brought on 2 young cowboys, one named Jack Martinez and another named Samuel Green. Both were hardworking and honest, and they fit well into the rhythm of the ranch. Rose insisted on feeding them dinner several times a week, and soon they felt almost like family. Billy, now 10, was old enough to take on real responsibilities around the ranch. He worked alongside his father and the hired hands, learning to rope and brand, to recognize signs of sickness in the cattle, to mend fences and clear irrigation ditches. Carter was patient but firm, teaching his son the value of hard work and the importance of treating animals with respect. Clara, at 7, was less interested in cattle and more interested in everything else. She followed her mother everywhere, learning to sew and cook and manage a household. But she also had a streak of wildness in her, a love of riding and exploring that reminded Carter of himself at that age. She would tear through the property on her pony, her long dark hair flying behind her, and return with pockets full of interesting rocks and stories about what she had seen. "That girl is going to give us gray hairs," Rose said fondly, watching Clara gallop past the house one afternoon. "Too late," Carter replied, pointing to his own temples where silver was beginning to thread through the brown. "Already starting." "You are distinguished," Rose assured him. "Very handsome. You have to say that. You are married to me." "I do not have to say anything," Rose said, standing on her toes to kiss his cheek, "but it happens to be true." Life settled into a good rhythm. The ranch prospered, the children grew, and Carter and Rose grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced challenges, of course. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle diseases and market fluctuations. Billy broke his arm falling from a horse when he was 12, and Clara came down with scarlet fever when she was 9, terrifying them both until the fever finally broke. But they weathered it all together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. And always, at the center of everything, was the memory of that day in Patterson's general store, when a cowboy had stepped forward to defend a young woman he did not even know, and changed both their lives forever. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Carter took Rose back to the spot where they had had their first buggy ride, the spring with the cottonwood trees. The children were old enough now to be left on their own for an afternoon, with Billy at 17 perfectly capable of keeping an eye on 14-year-old Clara. They sat on a blanket by the water, much as they had 2 decades earlier, and Carter pulled out a small wrapped package. "I have something for you." Rose opened it to find a beautiful silver locket on a delicate chain. When she opened it, she found 2 tiny photographs inside, one of Billy and one of Clara. "Carter, it is beautiful," she breathed. "Where did you get the photographs?" "Had them made in town last month," he said. "I wanted you to have something to keep them close to your heart, the way you have always kept me close to yours." Rose felt tears spring to her eyes as she had so many times over the years with this man. "Help me put it on." He fastened the chain around her neck and she touched the locket, feeling the weight of it, the meaning behind it. 20 years, she said softly. "Can you believe it has been 20 years? Best 20 years of my life," Carter said. "Well, except for maybe the first year. That was the hardest. Building the house in all weather, trying to make enough money to survive, being so tired all the time." "But we were happy," Rose reminded him. "Even when we were exhausted and broke, we were happy." "We were," he agreed, "because we had each other. That has always been enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water flow over the rocks, listening to the leaves rustle overhead. Then Rose said, "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? In the restaurant, I said a lot of things. You said there was a freedom to the cowboy life. Watching sunrises over mountains, camping under stars. Do you miss it? That freedom?" Carter considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted. "There is a part of me that will always love the trail, the simplicity of it. But Rose, what I have with you, with our family, that is a different kind of freedom. The freedom to build something lasting. The freedom to love deeply and be loved in return. The freedom to watch my children grow and know that I am helping to shape good people. I would not trade any of that for all the sunrises and stars in the world." "Good answer," Rose said, leaning against him, "because you are stuck with us." "Stuck with you," he repeated, putting his arm around her. "That is one way to put it. I prefer to think of it as blessed beyond measure." They stayed by the spring until the sun began to set, reluctant to leave this spot that held so many memories. Finally, as the light turned golden and long shadows stretched across the ground, they packed up their blanket and headed back to the wagon. As they drove home, Rose thought about the girl she had been 20 years ago. Frightened, alone, falsely accused in a store full of strangers. If someone had told that girl what her future held, she never would have believed it. A husband who loved her completely, 2 healthy children, a thriving ranch and business, a community where she was respected and valued. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. "What are you thinking about?" Carter asked, glancing over at her. "About how lucky I am," Rose said. "About how one moment, one decision, can change everything. If you had not stepped forward that day in Patterson's store, my whole life would be different." "Maybe," Carter said. "Or maybe we would have found each other some other way. I like to think we were meant to be together, and one way or another it would have happened." "You romantic," Rose teased. "You made me this way," he countered. "I used to be a tough, hardened cowboy. Then you came along with your big brown eyes and your brave heart, and I never stood a chance." When they arrived home, they found the children had prepared dinner as a surprise. Billy had shot a turkey that afternoon, and Clara had made biscuits and roasted vegetables. The 4 of them sat down to eat together, talking and laughing, and Rose looked around the table at her family and felt such overwhelming gratitude that it was almost painful. After dinner, Carter pulled out his harmonica and played while Clara danced, and Billy pretended to be too old for such things, but tapped his foot anyway. Rose watched them, committing every detail to memory. The firelight dancing on the walls, the sound of music and laughter, the feeling of complete and utter contentment. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not some grand adventure or dramatic moment, but this, an ordinary evening with the people she loved most in the world, in a home they had built together through hard work and determination and unwavering faith in each other. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Rose and Carter sat on the porch watching the stars. The air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of hay and cattle and the distinctive smell of the New Mexico desert. "Billy is going to want to go to college," Rose said quietly. "He has been talking about it, I know," Carter said. "He is smart, smarter than I ever was. He should have opportunities to learn and grow. It will cost money. We will figure it out, we always do. And Clara will want to go too eventually. She is sharp as a tack, that one." Carter smiled. "She gets that from her mother. We have worked so hard to build all this," Rose said, gesturing to encompass the ranch around them. "Sometimes I worry that we are building it for nothing, that the children will not want it, that they will want different lives." "Then we will support them in whatever they choose," Carter said firmly. "This ranch, this life, it is wonderful for us, but our children are not us. They get to make their own choices, forge their own paths, and whatever they decide, we will be proud of them." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I married well," he replied. "You have made me a better man in every way, Rose. Smarter, kinder, braver. Everything good in my life comes back to you." "Stop," she said, but she was smiling. "You are going to make me cry." "After 20 years, I should be allowed to make my wife cry occasionally," he teased. "Especially on our anniversary." They sat there for a long time, holding hands and watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. The years ahead would bring their own challenges and changes, Rose knew. Billy would indeed go to college, studying engineering and eventually becoming a surveyor, mapping the growing territories of the Southwest. Clara would marry a doctor and move to Albuquerque, where she would raise 4 children and become active in women's suffrage. The ranch would continue to grow and prosper, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. But all that was still ahead of them. Tonight, on their anniversary, Rose and Carter simply sat together in the peace and quiet of the evening, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment and excited for whatever adventures still lay ahead. "I love you," Rose said quietly. "More than I can ever put into words." "I love you too," Carter replied. "Always have, always will." They went inside eventually, climbing into the bed they had shared for 20 years, and Rose curled up against Carter's side the way she had done thousands of times before. His arm came around her automatically, and she listened to his breathing slow and deepen as he fell asleep. Just before she drifted off herself, Rose thought once more about that day in the general store. She had been so afraid, so humiliated, so certain that her life was about to fall apart. Instead, it had been the beginning of everything good. Carter had paid for bread she had not stolen, cleared her name when no one else would, and in doing so had given her far more than justice. He had given her hope, love, partnership, and a future brighter than she had ever imagined possible. She would never stop being grateful for the cowboy who had stepped forward when he did not have to, who had seen her worth when others saw only an easy target for blame. He had saved her that day, in more ways than he probably ever realized. And she had saved him too in her own way, giving him a reason to settle down, a family to love, a home to come back to. They had saved each other, really. And they had built something beautiful together. As Rose finally fell asleep, she was smiling, her hand resting over the locket that held her children's photographs, her heart full of love for the man beside her and the life they had created. The years continued to unfold in their steady rhythm. Billy left for college when he was 19, and Carter surprised Rose by being more emotional about it than she was. He stood in the yard watching the stage carry his son away and had to wipe his eyes with his bandana. "He will be back," Rose assured him, linking her arm through his. "And when he comes back, he will have so much knowledge to share with us." "I know," Carter said. "I am proud of him. I just miss him already." Clara filled the house with energy in Billy's absence. She was 15 now, beautiful and spirited, with more suitors than her father was comfortable with. Carter took to cleaning his guns on the porch whenever young men came calling, which Rose found both amusing and exasperating. "You cannot intimidate every boy who looks at her," she told him. "Watch me," he replied. But when Clara fell in love with James Hartley, a young doctor who had recently set up practice in Stein's Pass, even Carter had to admit he was a good man. James was kind, educated, and clearly devoted to Clara. He asked Carter's permission to court her properly, which earned him points, and he treated Rose with respect and affection, which earned him more. The wedding took place when Clara was 20, a beautiful ceremony even more elaborate than Rose and Carter's had been. The whole town turned out, and Billy came home from college for the occasion, bringing with him a serious young woman named Margaret, whom he introduced as his intended. Rose and Carter looked at each other over their children's heads and shared a smile. Their babies were grown now, making their own lives, their own choices. "We did good," Carter whispered to Rose during the reception. "We did," she agreed. With both children married and living their own lives, Rose and Carter found themselves alone together again for the first time in over 2 decades. The house felt quiet without the bustle of family, but it was a peaceful quiet, not a lonely one. They fell into new routines. Carter continued to run the ranch with the help of their employees, while Rose scaled back her sewing business, taking on only the projects that interested her. They traveled occasionally, taking the train to visit Billy in Arizona or Clara in Albuquerque. They spent evenings reading together or playing cards, and they talked the way they had always talked, sharing their thoughts and dreams and observations about the world. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Carter said, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" "What do you mean?" Rose asked. "If I had not been in Patterson's store that day, if I had kept my mouth shut. If you had actually been guilty of what he accused you of, any number of things could have changed and we might never have met." Rose considered this. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted, "but not in a worried way, more in a grateful way. I am grateful for every choice and chance that led me to you." "Me too," Carter said. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles in the gesture that had become so familiar over the years. "I have been thinking about something lately." "What is that?" "About legacy. About what we leave behind. The ranch will go to Billy and Clara someday, and they will decide what to do with it. But I have been thinking we should do something more, something that helps other people the way we were helped when we were starting out." Rose turned to look at him with interest. "What did you have in mind?" "What if we set up a fund to help young couples get started with their own land or businesses? Nothing huge, just enough to give them a chance the way Mr. Thomas gave us a chance. We could work with the bank to manage it, make sure the money goes to people who will use it well." Rose felt warmth spread through her chest. Even after all these years, Carter still had the ability to surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "I think that is a wonderful idea. We could call it the Powell Family Fund. Or the Pioneer Fund," Carter suggested. "Keep it broader than just our name." They spent the next few weeks working out the details with the bank manager in town. They contributed a significant sum of money with instructions that it be loaned out to promising young people at very low interest, with the profits going back into the fund to help more people. It was their way of paying forward the kindness and opportunities they had received. The fund became one of Rose's proudest accomplishments. Over the years, it would help dozens of young couples start ranches, open shops, buy land, and build lives. Each time she heard about someone being helped by the fund, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the joys and sorrows of life. Grandchildren arrived. Billy and Margaret had 3 sons, while Clara and James had 2 daughters and 2 sons. Rose and Carter delighted in their grandchildren, spoiling them with candy and stories, and letting them run wild on the ranch in a way they had never quite let their own children do. "That is the privilege of grandparents," Rose told Clara when her daughter complained that the children were being indulged. "We get all the fun without all the responsibility." Carter taught the grandchildren to ride and rope, to recognize different bird calls and animal tracks, to appreciate the vast beauty of the New Mexico landscape. Rose taught them to sew and cook, to read and write, to treat everyone with kindness regardless of their station in life. "Your grandmother was once accused of stealing," Carter told them one evening as they all sat around the fire. "She was innocent, but people were quick to judge, so we never judge others without knowing their full story. We give people the benefit of the doubt. We stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves." The children listened with wide eyes, and Rose felt tears prick at her own eyes. That day in the store felt like a lifetime ago now, like something that had happened to different people. But it had shaped them, shaped their values and their choices, and now they were passing those lessons on to the next generation. As they grew older, Rose and Carter slowed down. Carter's knees began to ache from years of hard work, and Rose's fingers became stiff from decades of sewing. They hired more help to run the ranch and spent more time simply being together, savoring each ordinary day. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The whole town came, along with family from across the territory. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, food and laughter. Rose wore a new dress made by Clara, and Carter wore his best suit, and they danced together while everyone watched and applauded. 40 years, Rose marveled as they swayed together. "How is that possible?" "Good living," Carter replied, "and a beautiful wife who keeps me young." "Flatterer." "Truth-teller," he corrected later. After the party had wound down and the guests had left, they sat together on the porch of the house they had built all those years ago. The stars were brilliant overhead and the night air was cool and sweet. "You have any regrets?" Rose asked. Carter thought about it seriously. "Not a single one," he said finally. "Everything I have done, every choice I have made since the day I met you has led to this. And this is pretty damn good." "Carter Powell language," Rose said, but she was smiling. "Sorry, this is pretty darn good. Better." They sat in comfortable silence, and Rose thought about the journey they had taken together. From that frightened girl in a store and that young cowboy with more courage than sense to this. 2 people who had built a life, raised a family, contributed to their community, and loved each other through it all. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For stepping forward that day. For believing in me, for choosing me." Carter pulled her close. "You have it backwards. Thank you for letting me step forward, for believing in me, for choosing me. I was just a cowboy with nothing but dreams. You made those dreams real." "We made them real together," Rose corrected. "That is what partnership means." As they grew older still, into their 60s and then 70s, they remained devoted to each other. When Carter's health began to fail, Rose was there to care for him. When Rose caught pneumonia one harsh winter, Carter barely left her side until she recovered. They had weathered so much together that nothing could shake the foundation of their love. They celebrated their 50th anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. It was a quieter affair than the 40th had been, just family gathered at the ranch for a meal. But it was perfect, full of love and laughter and the kind of deep contentment that comes from a life well lived. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Carter said, "You know what I realized today?" "What is that?" "We have been together more than half a century. 50 years. That is longer than most people live their entire lives." "It is a gift," Rose said. "Every single day with you has been a gift, even the hard days, especially the hard days," she said. "Because those are the days when we proved what we are made of, when we showed that our love is strong enough to weather anything." Carter pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in their bedroom, holding each other the way they had done thousands of times before. "I love you, Rose Powell. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that store, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Rose whispered, "always and forever." They lived several more good years together, staying on the ranch until their children finally convinced them to move into town where they could be closer to medical care. They rented a small house in Steins Pass, and though it was strange not to wake up to the sound of cattle and the wide open sky, they adapted as they always had. Carter passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 83. Rose woke one morning to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was crushing, but there was also gratitude. Gratitude for the life they had shared, for the love that had sustained them, for the family they had created together. At the funeral, Billy spoke about his father's courage and kindness. Clara talked about his devotion to family. The grandchildren shared memories of his patience and humor. And Rose sat in the front pew, the silver locket Carter had given her 40 years ago still around her neck, and felt surrounded by the love they had built. Rose lived for 3 more years after Carter's death. She spent her days with family, taking joy in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing stories about the old days and the cowboy who had changed her life. She never remarried, never wanted to. Carter had been her great love, her partner, her best friend. That kind of love came once in a lifetime if you were lucky, and she had been very lucky indeed. On a quiet spring morning, Rose passed away in her sleep at the age of 86. Her family found her with a smile on her face, the photograph of Carter she kept by her bed clutched in her hand. They buried her next to Carter in the little cemetery outside Steins Pass, under a cottonwood tree that had grown tall and strong over the years. The headstones were simple but elegant. Carter James Powell, 1855–1938. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, a man of courage and honor. Rose Marie Powell, 1856–1941. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, a woman of grace and strength. Below both inscriptions, the family had added one more line, together always. The ranch continued under Billy's management, then passed to his sons and then to their children. The pioneer fund that Rose and Carter had established continued to help young couples start their lives together. And the story of how they met, of the cowboy who defended a falsely accused woman and found love in the process, became a family legend passed down through the generations. But the true legacy of Rose and Carter Powell was not the land or the money or even the story. It was the example they set, of choosing love over fear, of standing up for what was right even when it was difficult, of building something lasting through hard work and mutual devotion. It was the proof that one moment of courage, one decision to step forward when others stood back, could change everything. Their great-great-grandchildren would eventually walk the land that Rose and Carter had claimed and built upon. They would swim in Willow Creek and climb the cottonwood trees and listen to the stories of how it all began. And they would carry forward the values that had been instilled by that first couple, integrity, kindness, courage, and love. In Stein's Pass, the general store that had once been Patterson's had long since changed hands, been rebuilt, and changed hands again. But elderly residents still remembered the story of the false accusation and the cowboy who had made it right. They told it to their children and grandchildren, a cautionary tale about the dangers of rushing to judgment and a love story about the rewards of doing the right thing. The truth was that Rose and Carter's story was not unique in its elements. The Wild West was full of stories of cowboys and hardship and love found in unexpected places. But what made their story special was the way they lived it, with honesty, devotion, and an unwavering commitment to each other and to the life they were building together. They had started with nothing but hope and a few dollars between them. They had faced down false accusations, financial struggles, harsh weather, and all the challenges that came with building a life on the frontier. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. In the end, the bread Carter paid for that first day in Patterson's general store had cost 10 cents. But the love that began in that moment, the life they built together, the family they created, was priceless. It was a fortune measured not in dollars, but in shared mornings and quiet evenings, in children raised and grandchildren spoiled, in 50 years of partnership and passion and profound respect. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up for someone who needs defending, that a small act of kindness can ripple outward in ways you never imagined. That love, real love, is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day to honor and cherish another person. Carter had chosen to step forward when he could have stayed silent. Rose had chosen to trust him when she had every reason to be wary. And from those two choices, made in a dusty general store in a small New Mexico town on a hot summer day in 1882, had come a lifetime of love and happiness. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death. But it was a good ending, a complete ending, with nothing left unresolved. They had loved deeply and been deeply loved in return. They had raised good children who raised good children of their own. They had contributed to their community and helped others along the way. They had lived with integrity and died with dignity. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, perhaps they were together again. Rose with her quick smile and skillful hands, Carter with his steady courage and kind heart. Perhaps they were young again, riding through the New Mexico desert under an endless sky, the whole bright future stretched out before them, ready for whatever adventures came next. But whether such an afterlife existed or not, their love lived on. In the land they had claimed, in the family they had created, in the values they had instilled, and in the story that would be told for generations to come about the cowboy who paid for stolen bread that was never stolen at all, and the seamstress who captured his heart forever. It was a simple story, really, but the best love stories often are. Boy meets girl. Boy defends girl. They fall in love, build a life, face challenges together, raise a family, grow old side by side, and leave the world a little better than they found it. Simple, beautiful, true. And it all began with 10 cents for a loaf of bread, and the courage to do the right thing when it mattered most.